Check, 1, 2. You guys hear me okay? Okay. I never count to 3 because I'm a sound guy. If I count 3, that means I have to lift something. So, anyway, I just kind of want to give you guys an overview of what's going to happen over the next 5 weeks or so. Tonight we're going to have 2 doctors come up here and talk about, things like why cholesterol isn't bad, sugar, and all kinds of technical data. I don't want you guys to equate tonight with the actual ketogenic diet and the fasting stuff because it's going to be very technical tonight. And and so it might be hard for some of you to understand. And so with that being said, you guys are going to, just don't get discouraged if you're going, oh my gosh, this is too complicated, because it's not about the diet. It's simple. I'm going to be back next week and I'll give you guys the lakeside redneck version of the diet. I'm going to tell you a little bit my story. So those of you who are wondering what the fat guy's doing up here, I've lost 120 pounds so far. I've been doing this about 5.5 months so far. So, I'll just tell you this point in the process. It's a lifestyle for me. I found that out right away because this is a life changer. And it's unlike anything you've probably ever done in your life. So anyway, that's what it is. And it's super good. It's like it's the best thing in the world. So anyhow, how many of you here do not go to church here? Well, I got quite a few of you. Okay, the rest of you all go to church here. Okay, so those of you who do not go to church here, I have to pray for the church people because if I don't, they'll all lynch me. So if you guys don't mind, I'm going to say a quick prayer. We're ready to get started. Okay. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this big group and just we just thank you for where everybody's at in their walk and what they're doing, and we're just asking you to bless these meetings and bless all the people that are here, and just be with us in this whole process. Amen. Where's Dr. Lenzkes?
I'm like short right now.
Are you seriously just strolling on up here?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So you guys, this is Dr. Brian Lenzkes. He's been with me. He's been with me since day one. So I call him like every day and annoy him every day. So anyway, so here we go.
So just curious, how many people heard of us through the 2 Keto Dudes? The 2 Keto Dudes. I recommend it to everyone. It's a great podcast. It's what I listen to a lot. It really helped me out. I'm glad you guys are here because they were nutty enough to have me on there recently on episode 99. Now they're on episode 100, and that's worth watching because they're talking to a bunch of people who lost 100 pounds or more. And it's amazing because these guys are just 2 guys that just came out of nowhere that struggle with their weight. And they both had type 2 diabetes. One guy, Richard, lost weight first, so he reached out to his friend in faith, and named Carl. And Carl has lost a ton of weight, and they're both doing outstanding. So I love these guys because they're not selling a product, they're not pushing an agenda. They say, here's my struggle this week, I didn't lose any weight, I tried this. So they're experimenting on themselves and sharing their experience with other people. So I would highly recommend that. It's 2 Keto Dudes, 2 and then Keto and Dude. It's a podcast on, you can look them up online. They have a website that you can look at. And so I would highly, and there's a ton of people that we're going to talk about. And there's also on my website, lowcarbmd.com, there's a lot of connections to all these people. These are all people who helped me out along the way. And it's a great community. You know, it's really something. And there's so many parallels between that and Christianity and faith and all that. Because believe it or not, diet is a religion for a lot of people. And you'll see firestorms and fights and nasty stuff going on because people really believe in what they believe in, especially if they've lost weight or had success with that. So we may run over time a little bit today because Dr. Scher is after me and he has a lot of important data, but we have to slow down a little bit. Yesterday, anyone who was here, we went really quick and it's overwhelming because it took me months and months and months to figure this stuff out, and I'm a doctor. So, it's all new to us. And as docs, we're all kind of in the same page because we get about an hour or so of nutrition in all of our time in med school and residency. So this is all, we kind of just are told something, we just kind of run with that. And that's what I did for 12 years of my career. So the Christians will know what this means. More of you, less of me. Most of us are talking about more following God, less of what my stuff is and my issues and my wants and all that kind of stuff. But for this talk, we're talking about more of God and less of me losing weight. But this is not a weight loss. This is not necessarily a weight loss. We're talking about lifestyle. And that's why Dr. Scher is one of my heroes in this area. You'll hear him speak next. Financial disclosures. Chuck stole one of mine out of there. Oh, he did. Oh, none. I have no financial disclosures. I don't get a penny from any of these people, any of the websites I connect to, all that kind of stuff. Because that's important, because you have to look at someone's motive. And when I'm talking to you because I believe in this, and I believe in the people that I refer to. Respective, no kickbacks. Our intent is to educate. Our intent is to grow this community. And the crazy part about it, Mark Waddell, are you here? Oh, there. Come on up, man, for a minute. So Mark Waddell, during my journey, I started losing weight. Mark runs into me. We're sitting at my kitchen table, and he looks at me and said, "Man, you're losing weight." I said, "Yeah, I'm about 20, at that point, like 20 pounds down." So we got into this discussion. He said, "What are you doing?" And this will work. And I said, "Well, I'm kind of cutting my carbs and exercising more." And he said, "You've always kind of done that, haven't you?" I said, "Well, yeah, I have." "So what's different? Are you taking a drug or are you doing something different?" And he was looking at me like, "You're doing something." And so I said, "Well, I do this little fasting stuff sometimes." And don't stress out anyone, because the fasting is a lot down the road. And it's not for everyone. There's some people who won't fast. And so we have differences in that. But he says, "Hey, do you know who Jason Fung is?" And as you see when I talk, Jason Fung was one of my mentors. I read his book, and he changed my life and my career. So I look up to him a lot, and I know his integrity and who he is. And so Mark said he had just read the book, and I couldn't believe it because he's not a medical guy. So.
Yeah, I was actually fasting several months before that, and I really felt God laying on my heart to start to write about fasting. And I've fasted for over 30 years. It's been a regular habit of mine, and I've got a lot of benefits out of it. And so I started writing about it, and I wanted to get some medical background for doing that. And so I started looking at that book, and then Brian and I happened to bump into each other, and those little ketogenic keywords just tied us together, and we started talking about, hey, let's talk about fasting together from the medical perspective and from the spiritual, emotional perspective, and the benefits of both, because there are benefits on both sides of it. It's really a holistic thing, because you just can't look at the physical. It affects us spiritually also.
Yeah, and relationship and all that kind of stuff. So thanks. But he's the one guy. If you have a miserable time, it's because of him. He's the one who talked me into it. But the church was so nice here. Foothills gave us this room for free so that we could reach people because they believe in it too. And we all see that the church is sick also. And so we need to go closer to God. So we figure fasting and being in a ketotic state, and we'll explain all that stuff, don't worry. There's a lot of lingo we're going to throw out there. But ketosis, all that means is that you're burning fat as your fuel source rather than the sugar. So a lot of us are hooked on sugar, so we can't imagine going any time without eating sugar. Chuck Hicks, the first time I met with him, he said, "I can't go 3 hours without eating, or I'll freak out, I'll sweat, and I'll get crazy." So that guy fasts like no one I've ever seen in my life, and it's crazy. He can go 2 weeks without eating. He's drinking liquids and doing other stuff, but because he's using his fat stores, and that's what we're kind of talking about here. And so I reached out to Low Carb USA. It's the best conference I've ever been to in my medical career, and it's here in San Diego in July. Anyone who's interested in this stuff, they talk about a lot of different areas of medicine. So it convinced me it's not just about weight loss. There's a lot of other benefits that come with this. And so all these guys said, hey, every single person I reached out to said, how do I help you? Bret Scher, I reached out to him. He said, what do you need? I'll be there. And he'll be here today. What this class is not, it's not a miracle weight loss. Even some people in church, the way it was advertised kind of got butchered down a little bit, and it was like this miracle weight loss thing. That's not what we're about. It's a lifestyle, and it's about you taking the steps and changing your life, and I'm telling you, you will have results. It's not if, you will if you take it seriously. Oh, the man's here. Oh, I'm pressured now. Dr. Scher just walked in. All right. It's not an infomercial. We're not selling you a product. It's not medical advice. I have to make that clear. None of us can give individual medical advice without having a patient-physician relationship or a nutritionist-physician relationship. That's why I'm partnering a lot with Jeff Cotterman, with Tri-System Nutrition, Rachel Gregory with Killing It Keto. They're great nutritionists who understand this stuff. They work with athletes, they work with people who are morbidly obese, so they understand the science behind this, and that's critical. Because as docs, we have a role. Our role is to make sure you're medically stable, that if you're on medications, we're able to help them taper those medicines to get you off them. That's our goal, believe it or not, despite what you're told about us. Here's why you should listen to me. This is all, I'm just gonna fly through this. These are my credentials: BS at UC Irvine, USC School of Medicine, resident and chief resident at Mercy Hospital in the Scripps system, 13 years in private practice, top doc in San Diego for 11 years. This is voted on by my peers. I may not be a good doctor, but they like me at least because I give them good notes. And I'm a world expert, you should know that, at gaining weight. So that's me. That's how I grew up. And so, we were out hiking, all these guys. This guy here is a dentist, and he's lost a ton of weight. This is from 2016, September. And this guy's lost a lot of weight, and he's doing more Weight Watchers type stuff, but cutting his carbs significantly. And so just to prove I'm a true expert, that's not good. That's not good. Because that's what's going to put us at our biggest risk. When we have a big belly right there, that puts us at our biggest risk of cardiovascular disease. But that being said, if you're a skinny guy that has metabolic derangement, you're at a higher risk than this guy. So that's really, when someone has a big hard beer gut and they hit their belly and go, look, there's not an ounce of fat there, all that fat is around the organs. That's the most dangerous fat you can have. So how did I get here? Same thing, struggled with weight, played football, and I wasn't the size of Chuck, this big monster guy. So I had to gain a bunch of weight to play football. So I was 205, I played in the middle of the defensive line. Then I wrestled 165, so I'd have to drop 40 pounds like that really quickly. And so you kill yourself, you're spitting and running and doing all this stuff. So the first time I understood it as a doctor, how critical this is I went running with a friend of mine. And after we were done, he's in pretty good shape, he's a long-distance swimmer. I said, why don't you come back to my house, I'll squeeze some orange juice. And I have an orange tree. And he looked at me and said, doctor, you're kidding me, right? You're gonna drink orange juice? I said, yeah, fruit sugar, it's natural, it's good. And he said, that's the worst thing you can eat. And he said, or drink. And he said, how many oranges do you have to squeeze to make a pitcher of orange juice? I said, usually like 2 shopping bags full. He said, when's the last time you invited someone over and said, we're each gonna eat a bag of oranges, right? So it's common sense to him. To me, I thought, he's right. He says, plus you take all the pulp and all the good stuff out of the orange, and you're getting the pure sugar, right? You might as well shoot it up like heroin. And he says, other thing, doctor, teasing me because I'm a doctor and he's not. He said, what do you tell your diabetics when they go on insulin, if they get low sugars? We tell them to drink orange juice because it spikes your sugar so fast that it helps you to get out of that low sugar state. So why would we do that to ourselves purposely? So then I watched Sugar the Bitter Truth. I would highly recommend it. On my website, I have links to all this stuff, so if you go there, you don't have to jot things down and get all stressed out because what I want you guys to understand is certain concepts. So I'm going to try to do a better job than we did yesterday of getting to that point. But Dr. Lustig, what he came up with in this, he's a pediatric endocrinologist. He says the #1 correlation with obesity and diabetes in kids is it Mexican food, is it Chinese food, is this? Nope. Drinks, sugary drinks, Gatorade, Coke, Pepsi, all the stuff that we give our kids because we love them. And we realize this is what's causing the problem. And anywhere in the world where we introduce this stuff, as you'll see later, it's a disaster. Because your body just can't handle that much sugar at times. The other thing is books. Some of you guys may have read books by these guys, Good Calories, Bad Calories, Why We Get Fat, What to Do About it, and The Big Fat Surprise. All excellent books. As a doctor, it educated me a lot because I had to step back and see what these guys are talking about. And they're basing their recommendations on science that they've seen and clinical experience. So I had the pleasure just recently of talking to Gary Taubes, which is incredible because he makes a lot more money than I could ever dream of making, and he's a great researcher, and he's done a lot of great work. And then so I went through this whole thing. A lot of people in this room may have tried different things, and maybe over the years tried something. Dr. Oz says this is the miracle supplement and all that they're here for a few months, and then they go away, and then the next one comes out and it goes away. And so we've all seen this stuff, so we're all skeptical, But the fact you're here means that you're curious, and you're saying, okay, I'll look at one more thing. And that's what I had to do too, and say, I'll try this and see if it makes a difference. And I was drinking the protein shakes and the green drinks and doing all that kind of stuff. But it's crazy because a lot of us are killing ourselves doing the same thing as the orange juice. We put a bunch of vegetables in there, then we say, oh, that doesn't taste very good. So let's pour some grape juice in there and orange juice and whatever else in there. And we're loading ourselves with sugar first thing in the morning. Then we're hungry all day and miserable and yelling at our coworkers. So Rob Wolf, I was reading about this guy, and he mentioned this guy that we're talking about, Jason Fung. Probably the hugest influence on my career. This guy is a nephrologist up in Canada. He has a weight loss clinic that he does called IDM. He got burned out because he said, look, I'm doing dialysis on these guys after they blow up their engine. So it's like I'm changing their oil now, and it's too late. I can't help them. And anyone who has a family member on dialysis knows what a disaster it is and how devastating it is. And it's because of chronically poorly controlled sugars. And it's toxic to our body. And we'll hammer that point home. So I said, who the heck is this guy? I watched him on YouTube. There's a link to him on my website. I would highly recommend. He has a book called The Obesity Code, which I think is excellent. You know, it's a little bit scientific, but when you know the gist and you get what he's saying, it will be life-changing. And that was me. What kind of nut is going to fast when this food is so good, right? Just to eat like balanced diet like we tell everyone. But there are benefits that we're going to talk about here. And then I said, that's the same thing as a lot of us have said. I'll give it 1 month. If it doesn't work, I'm back to the Slurpees, because that's low fat, right? Because we're told low fat, low fat, low fat. We're just hammered with this point our whole lives. And as doctors, low fat, cholesterol is killing people. We have it so entrenched in our mind that if we think differently, it's really tough. So going back to what Mark and I were talking about, I got back from Guatemala, and this was a life-changing event for me. It's always life-changing doing medical mission trips because we get to help a lot of people, and they'll wait 14 hours to see us, and they don't complain, which is nice. If I'm 5 minutes late in my practice, I get yelled at. So I was there, and we were, and before that, I was drinking low-carb drink. All the stuff I'm talking about, this is what I was doing. Eating 6 small meals. We know we're going to shut the metabolism down if we don't eat all day and all that kind of stuff. As Jason Fung will tell you, not true. There's no data to support that, but we still tell everyone that. Because we think that we have to just keep the engine running all the time. But insulin resistance is the key, and that's the point I want to make to you. That's the take-home message for today. All this other stuff can fall apart. When we understand that, it's going to change everything for you, because you'll understand. The second Chuck understood that, he became an animal doing this kind of stuff. I was exercising 5 or 6 times a day, and that's the other thing, is it's frustrating for a lot of us in the room. People who are skinny their whole life say, you're lazy and you're stupid. You just got to get off your butt and go do something. But they don't understand the underlying pathology is insulin resistance. And the nutritionists sometimes will get upset with us, with me at least, or us who say that, because they say, you're taking personal responsibility away from people. You're saying it's not their fault. I'm saying, well, they just haven't been given the right tools. Once they get the right tools, now you have total personal responsibility, because when I know how my body works and I choose not to do that, then that's on me. But when someone gives me bad advice and I'm following it, like if someone shows me how to golf and I hit it terrible all the time like I do, I guess I could practice my whole life and I'll never get better. But if someone walks by and says, hey, you're holding your club, why don't you just adjust this? And then you hit it far. That hasn't happened for me yet, but maybe someone here can help me. So I was frustrated, ready to give up. And then Jason Fung video on YouTube. It's free. Anyone can watch it. It's just an interview he did. I liked it because he said, what was I going to say? So going back to Guatemala. So in Guatemala, we go hiking this volcano, which is an awesome experience. Anyone that comes on the medical trip with us will take you. But these guys looked at me. I was the biggest guy, and they looked at me and said, you're going to need a horse. They're trying to sell a horse, so you have to drive. I'm like, I'm not getting a horse. I've done this before. And they're like, no, you need a horse. Trust us. So they followed me halfway up the mountain, waiting. But I didn't give up. I made it. I would have died first, So this is Mark Waddell. There's the stuff we talked about. And then Mark said, we got to talk about this at church. It's important. Because we're going to help lives. Because when we get people praying and fasting in the church, it changes things. And all of you guys who have been around Christians that aren't so great, the only reason you feel that way is because we've earned that distinction. Because we haven't been seeking God. We've been trying to live by rules. And so I think when we start seeking after God, we do a better job as husbands and wives and neighbors and all that kind of stuff. All religion. I'm not just saying Christian. I'm just saying that because we're in the Christian era. I'll get kicked out if I don't say that. My experiences with patients have been the most unbelievable thing of my career. I love when patients, I don't want to single one of my patients out, but I see her sitting there. She's had, this weekend, I have goosebumps thinking about it. She dropped her triglycerides down from almost 400 down to about 100. Her HDL cholesterol went up. Her LDL went up just a tiny bit. And that's the thing. We worry so much about cholesterol that we miss. Dr. Scher is going to do an excellent job of explaining this because I saw him speak yesterday. But the point is we have to look at the entire neighborhood. You can get mugged anywhere, but if you're downtown La Jolla in the middle of the day, you're less likely to be mugged than downtown LA in the middle of the night. So what we have to do is put ourselves in the best situation where we're not going to get mugged. And my patient has put herself in it gives me goosebumps because I know what that means and the importance of all that kind of stuff. I've had 11 people come off, not me, they've done it themselves, 11 people come off insulin that were on insulin. In my career before that, in 12 years, not one. My partners who criticized me for this stuff, all of them said, this is crazy what you're talking about, it's a fad, it's going to go away. The point is, not one of them has taken anyone off insulin, one's an endocrinologist. So you have to look at that and say, wow, by taking someone off insulin, by making them come off meds, you're decreasing their cardiovascular risk factor significantly. And to the point of the fad, because I know that's on people's minds, I happen to collect old medical books. So I have one from 1889. I wonder what the treatment for diabetes was back then. High-fat, low-carb diet. 1911, same treatment. They didn't figure anything out in that time. 1921, we get insulin. Guess what 1922 the treatment for diabetes is? Insulin, right? So now we have something, now we have a weapon. LDL cholesterol happens to be one of the only things that we can modify for risk factors. So guess what? We like to use our medicine to lower the LDL, and we talked about LDL. And when I say LDL, I got scolded by my wife last night by not explaining. LDL is what we would call the bad cholesterol. HDL is the good cholesterol that's protected for heart disease. So when someone says, what's your total cholesterol? Us doctors, it doesn't mean anything to us. It's like saying, how much money do you make, right? If you can survive or not. Well, it depends how much money you're spending, right? If you're spending more money than you're making, you're always going to be in trouble. So knowing the total cholesterol is not helpful. Dr. Scher and I believe that, we don't believe, is what the data shows, is HDL is way more important of a cardiovascular risk factor, and triglycerides, because they're an indication that you're in a bad neighborhood, and that's the point. So I went to an Italian friend's birthday party, so I might not be down 45 if someone weighs me today, but I was as of yesterday morning, at least. So during this time, I reached out to Chuck, and I said, you know what? It's one of those things, I'll tell you, for people who don't know, you know when God is speaking to you, when you say, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to do that, and then you end up doing that thing. So I got clearance from my wife to reach out to Chuck because I saw that he was hurting, and he wasn't able to do a lot of stuff. And I asked him to join me on this journey because I'm still on the journey too, right? I'm not Mr. Cotterman back there. He's feeling, but this guy's a cut beast back there. So he's probably a better messenger than me. But the point is, we're on the journey. This is what our Christian walk looks like. This is what our spiritual walk, our being a husband, all that stuff. We're not perfect yet, but we're on the journey. So as long as we know we're on the road, we keep going. And so, Jeff, I had to re-educate. You talk about a job interview. I reached out to him. I texted him, hey, Jeff, I'm having a lot of success, having success with this guy and a few other people. And he's a nutritionist. He's been doing this for 27 years, sports nutrition. So he texts me back, what are you doing? I said, ketogenic, low carb. Who are you having success with? Me and my patients. Not interested. I said, why not? He said, I don't like all or none, because low carb is all or none. And so I texted him back, when you're 465 pounds, have type 2 diabetes, it's all or none. Right? Because you can't, at some point, you got to make a choice, because what you're doing has got you to where you're at. So at some point, we have to step back and change. If my marriage is a disaster, I better change something. It's not going to get better on its own. So it's the same thing with diet and nutrition. Happily to say, Jeff Cotterman is re-educated, and he's going to do a lot of stuff for this community, and I'm really excited to partner with him. Because I know I could do my part, and I know he does his part, because I can't manage each person and say, you're at a plateau, what do we do? I can't sit there for an hour in my office, but Jeff can, because he has the staff to do that kind of stuff. And this is why we can't fast. All of us have said the same thing. My stomach's going to growl. I'm going to get starving. I'm never going to. Anyone who's fasted will know, and they'll tell you, it's so weird. I thought I would keep eating more and more hungry, but I don't. I can tell you from experience, I don't get more hungry. I'm hardly hungry at all. So one of my first experiences with fasting actually was one of my patients came in. And I looked at him, and as I'll tell you, like we talk about, it's not always good, certain things. What's not good is if someone comes into your practice and says, hey, doc, guess what? I lost 30 pounds. I'm not trying. Red flag. We panic. The first thing you think, cancer, you got thyroid problems, you got all kinds of bad stuff, you got diabetes. So if someone's overweight, goes, I didn't change my diet, I'm losing weight. And I say, are you peeing a lot? Yeah. Are your vision kind of blurry? Yeah. You have diabetes. That's what happened. Because they stop making insulin, they'll drop weight super quick, right? But they end up in the hospital because we have to give them insulin to stabilize them again. So people think they'll be confused. I think we're going to argue that case. They're going to get low sugars. I want to talk about hypoglycemia quickly. I didn't have a chance to talk about this last time. Hypoglycemia is always a reaction to a sugar surge. So people who say they get hypoglycemic before lunch is because that morning, I can guarantee you, they either had a healthy oatmeal. Like everyone says, I eat oatmeal, it's healthy. They say it's good for your heart. What do you put in your oatmeal? Because no one eats oatmeal by itself. Brown sugar and raisins and this and that, all carbs. So you load up on carbs, and we wonder why we're crashing before. Or if you have a Coke, or if you have different things that are really you spike the insulin overshoots all the time, your sugars get low, and you get hungry. That's why people here you're chasing the dog, basically. You're chasing your tail because that sugar goes up, you spike up your insulin to get rid of it, and we'll talk about why our body does that. It's not a mistake, it's doing it on purpose. But if you have, bacon and eggs for breakfast, without toast, without all the other stuff, without orange juice, you will not get hypoglycemic before lunch. If you do, see a doctor that you got to get checked out because you're making medical science. People think they'll pass out. You think your brain will shut down. And that's always the argument against fasting. They say you need so many grams of carbs a day. If you're not taking any carbs, your brain's going to shut down. Our brain, 80% of our brain function can be run on ketones, which is breakdown of fat products. So you have to understand, where does the other sugar come from? Well, guess what? The good news is, remember that Krispy Kreme you ate a few years ago? You store this fat around your liver, and when you need sugar and it starts going low, our body is smart enough to say, uh-oh, our thermostat says sugar's going a little low. What do? We break down that fat back into sugar again. And I'll talk a little bit about that again, because a lot of people will say, I'm on a low-fat diet. But you're eating 4,000 calories of a low-fat diet? Where does that extra sugar go? After you deplete your muscle stores, you store it as fat. There's no other way around it. You're not storing that extra sugar as muscle. So the low-fat kick is really killing us, and I think we're going to make that point today. Mr. Cotterman back there said athletes need to carb load, you need to carb load. I worked out with him for 6 months, carb loading. I lost like 6 pounds working out, him making me sweat and yelling at me and everything. Chuck did the same thing and lost 30 pounds in a year working out 3 times a day. So the point is, when you get to a certain size, you can't carb load anymore because insulin resistance, and I'm going to make that point. This is what we've been told, and this is what people correct me all the time. Doctor, you got to eat every 2 or 3 hours. If you skip breakfast, your metabolism shut down, you're going to go into starvation mode. Now, historically, we have to look at our caveman friends. Those guys, or we won't even go back that far. Let's just look at the farmers. You see these farmers, they eat a huge breakfast. They don't say, oh, guys, it's been 2 hours, let's stop, shut off the machines, let's go sit down and eat something. They're working hard all day long, and then they have a big dinner at night. So in between, they're resting their pancreas, which is the organ that makes insulin, and we'll get into that a little bit. So it's unnatural to eat like we do. The cavemen would kill something, eat the whole thing because they didn't have a refrigerator. If they left it there, the other animals would eat it. So then they would, the next day, wake up, and they would have to go hunt for 4 or 5 more days until they got something again. They didn't have trail mix. They weren't going by 7-Eleven or anything like that. And the other point is you don't get confused, tired, weak, because you have to be ready to mobilize that energy that we store as fat to use as energy. That's why we have it. It's not just for looks. And so fasting, is it natural? I would argue that's not true. And fasting is a fad diet. We've already talked about that. Ketones are bad. Ketoacidosis. It's kind of an important point because any diabetic is afraid of ketoacidosis. By definition, ketoacidosis is when you have extremely low or no insulin because you shut your pancreas down because of sugar toxicity. The higher our sugar is, the more toxic it is to the pancreas. That's why we have to control the sugars. But ketoacidosis doesn't happen when you're in a ketosis because you have normal insulin levels still. And when you're running on fat, those ketones are not, it's a totally different level than ketoacidosis. So insulin, this is what I'm talking about. Insulin is the key, and this is something I glossed over too quickly because I was trying to get everyone to church on time. So tonight, I'm going to keep you all night. Luckily for you, have to get up at 4 tomorrow morning, so I won't be too late. Insulin's this is what what determines our fat storage. Insulin serves a function. It gets the sugar out of our bloodstream because it's toxic, and our body knows that. So it's produced by the beta cells. These are really important because a lot of the studies show that if your A1C, which is a 3-month sugar average, is higher than 5.5, you're killing off more beta cells in your pancreas than you're making. It's going to be a problem down the road. So in medicine, our goal is, a lot of people in this room are going to say, yeah, 7. We want your A1C at 7. At 7, we're still killing off more beta cells than we're making. It's going to be a trouble down the road. And we give you medicines that make those things kick out more insulin to get your sugars down, and that burns them out even faster. There's a medicine called glipizide, which I really do not like for that reason. People get worse and worse, then they're going to be on 5 different medicines. And it helps carbohydrate intake by the muscles. So insulin comes, it sees that you drank a big Slurpee and you had donuts that day. So insulin comes, your body says, oh, get this sugar out of here, because we can only have 1 teaspoon of sugar in our bloodstream at a time. So all the rest of that sugar that we just poured on it has to get out of the bloodstream. So insulin comes and says, oh, I'll clean it up, no problem. Muscle stores, glycogen. So first place, we're going to put it in muscles. Guess what? You don't work out, you're lazy, don't do anything. It says, sorry, your glycogen stores are still full already. So now what? Let's store it in the love handles here. Next, the next place is the most dangerous place around the liver. Liver and pancreas, we get fatty liver, and we're going to talk a little bit more about metabolic syndrome and why that's important. So that's what we don't want to do. And without insulin, we'll die. We have to have it. Everyone died before we had insulin of type 1 diabetes. Type 2 is different, because and I want to explain that a little bit, of a lot of us with type 2 diabetes and how we're mismanaging it in medicine. Type 1 diabetics are without a doubt skinny. There's no type 1 diabetics until we give them insulin. And if we don't, we're going to cause them to get obese, because we're going to give them more and more insulin because we're trying to get rid of those sugars that we just are giving them. So that's a problem. Major problem in the U.S., I just want to run through this real quick. 2/3 of Americans will never sustain weight loss until we get that insulin under control. Let me explain that, because Jason Fung did a great job, and this is what really got my attention. He says, look, when type 2 diabetics come into your office, we're looking at the sugar and the 3-month sugar average. And we say, oh, that's high. We got to get that sugar down. That's toxic. So what do? We put them on insulin. We put you on a medicine to try to lower that sugar, because we're fascinated with sugar. We want the sugar. We said that's the problem. The problem is when we have type 2 diabetics and we check your insulin level, which no one checks, and it's an important point. If you have one big take home, have your doctors check a fasting insulin level, because that is your check engine light. That is, you know that disaster's coming. Mr. Hicks back there, when I offered to have him come in, I said, I'll see you for free. I want to help you, because I know I can. And I know he's a guy who's strong-willed, that he can do it. It's hard. When you get that size, it's hard, and his story is outstanding. But the first thought I had when he came in, I thought, uh-oh. I said, when's the last time you had labs done? He said, 5 years. I said, oh. I'm going to be in trouble, because he's going to have diabetes, going to have cholesterol problems, all this stuff. Now I've just offered to help this guy. Now I'm going to be stuck managing all this stuff. I don't want to manage that. I want to help him lose weight. But if it's there, you got to fix it. So to my dismay, Chuck Hicks, 3-month sugar average, he gave me permission to talk about this. This isn't a HIPAA violation. He'll be talking about it too. His 3-month sugar average is 5.2. Better than mine. Mine was 5.8. His cholesterol, way better than mine. Number is better than mine, shockingly. Sugar, normal. Everything normal. Until we get this insulin that I've never checked in 12 years of practice. Insulin, markedly elevated, way high. Guess what, Chuck? With insulin that high, I know why you can't fast. Because your body our body preferentially uses sugar for fuel. So it's grabbing sugar. You take sugar away, now your body says, uh-oh, I'm starving. What do I do? So it's no problem, I'll get the fat. But insulin's blocking that, because insulin is making it store fat. So when that insulin level is super high, you can't get to your fat stores. That's why people here panic when they can't eat. You feel like I have to eat every 3 hours, because you're dependent on sugar. So guess what? Chuck fasted, dropped his sugar level down significantly, thereby dropping his insulin level. When he dropped his insulin level down, he has access to his fat stores that have been sitting there. So once he starts burning fat, he calls me 3 days in, and I can't believe this, because I said, Chuck, do not try fasting, because it's going to be too hard. I know what your insulin level is. It's impossible to fast right now. You have to have your insulin at least less than 12 to fast. So if you're at 40, not going to be able to do it, and you're going to freak out and say, this doesn't work, there's a crazy diet, don't do it. 3 days in, Chuck calls me at 5 in the afternoon. I'm busy doing stuff. Hey, you got a minute? Yeah. I haven't eaten yet today. I look at my watch, I said, what do you mean? It's 5 o'clock. I haven't eaten yet today. I said, I thought you couldn't go 3 hours without eating. So I'm not hungry, what should I do? I said, well, if you're not hungry, don't eat. If you're hungry, eat. So I think that's the point, is listening to our body. Chuck's body said, look, I have an energy source now. I'm not going to freak out and make you have to run to the store every 5 minutes and eat. So once someone fasts, right? And the other thing that was a huge factor for me was Mark Waddell. This guy runs an ultra marathon. He runs, Mark, how many miles do you run fasted? Where'd you go? When you run fasted, how many miles do you run?
Usually training runs, I can do like 15 miles.
Yeah, 15 miles fasted. And I can't get through lunch sitting on my computer, right? you put it in perspective, and we're all freaked out, like, oh my gosh, if you don't eat, you're going to shut your metabolism, all this bad stuff's going to happen. Like, if he can run 15 miles faster, I could probably sit at my desk and do that stuff. So that's the stuff we're seeing. And Chuck he's fasted for longer periods of time than I ever have, but he's very good at it, and he does it. And I said, Chuck, look, from a medical perspective, I can't say that a longer fast is going to shut your metabolism and cause other problems. And he says, no, I'm doing it for spiritual reasons. I grow closer to God, and I'm more in tune. He said, I could never fast before because I'd be freaking out the whole time. And so many of us Christians, we freak out. We go, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. I'm sweating. I get nervous because our body's not trained to do that. Just like I can't run an ultra marathon like this guy. But if I was crazy enough to try it, I would have to train a lot to do it, right? We'll see. So that's the point. Again, you can't fast. Insulin is what's leading to a lot of our medical problems. So we're treating people with insulin. There's a big study. Dr. Scher, is it the Accord study? I'm pretty sure it's the Accord study. I may have the name wrong. I'm almost 100% positive. You were my lifeline back there, man. So the Accord study, what they did is they said, hey, look, sugar's bad. We're going to control those sugars really tightly. So instead of getting it to 7, let's try to knock it down to the normal range into the 5 range. So we could be like Chuck one day and get our A1C down to 5.2. So when they tried doing it, higher mortality, higher death rate, higher strokes, higher heart attacks. Guess what the take-home message for us docs was? It's too dangerous to control sugar too tightly. They're getting hypoglycemic, and that's causing the problem. Instead of stepping back and saying, could it be the insulin we're giving them to lower the sugars down that's the problem? Instead of changing their diet, was it just give you more and more insulin, pump you full of insulin? Dog studies that they did back in the 70s, they were pumping insulin in through their arteries. They were blocking out those arteries with atherosclerosis. Insulin's bad. It's bad. So some of us need it, but I'm saying if we can limit it, we can limit it. And this is the same thing, insulin resistance. That's the whole point I was making. Blocking the fat absorption, making us feel fatigued. As an internal medicine doctor, the number one complaint I get is fatigue. Doc, I'm just tired all the time. I can't do stuff. I can't. So it's always bugged me. It's always bugged me, because especially you got skinny people and they're fatigued. Guess what? A lot of those people, I check their insulin levels, super high, surprisingly high. It's like, your insulin resistant. What are you eating? High sugar intake. Plus, you're taking monster drinks. You're doing all this stuff, just messing up your metabolism is really a problem. High insulin levels are associated with all these things that we worry about: Parkinson's disease, dementia, all this kind of bad stuff, peripheral vascular disease. So these are things we have to look at, and that's the point. Type 2 diabetics are coming in. You have to understand they have. Let me make that point. So our type 2 diabetics come in with high insulin levels, and we say, because it's not working anymore. So we say, your sugars are high. We have to give you more insulin. That's going to fix the problem. So what do? This is classic. I've done it. I'm embarrassed to say. We got to get your sugars under control. Put you on insulin. What happens? They gain more weight. 10 pounds. They come back. I gained 10 pounds. We told you got to watch your diet. You can't do this. We got to put you on more insulin now. We put on more insulin. So it's the same argument, because this one, I didn't say this yesterday, but it hits home. Jason Fung said this. Look, you come in, let's change it from insulin, let's change it to alcohol. So who wants to come in? I'll say Chuck came in. I'm drinking 10 beers a day, doc. I want to get drunk. It's not working. What do I have to do? What we're doing in Western medicine is say, 10 beers not working? Let's go to 12, 14, 16, 20 till you get the effect you want, right? Common sense tells us, hey, 10 beers, that's going to give you an ulcer and give you upset stomach and all that. Why don't we cut you down? Let's get you down on your beer for 2 weeks. Guess what? I'd say you go to a Chargers game, but we don't have any football teams. You go somewhere with your friends and you want to have a couple beers, you're going to feel it. You don't need 10 beers, 12 beers, 20 beers anymore. Same thing goes with insulin. The more sensitive we make our bodies by doing exercise, not stressing, getting enough sleep, all the stuff we don't do, we lower our insulin and make our body sensitive to that insulin we're already making, and that's the key. Metabolic syndrome. This is what is killing us. This is what we have to step back and look at. This is what we're looking at, metabolic syndrome. And you'll notice LDL cholesterol. LDL is the bad cholesterol again. That's the one we worry about like crazy. Not part of the equation on this problem. Increased blood pressure, weight around the middle, high sugars, high triglycerides, low HDL. These increase our risk significantly. This was a slide that I got from Dr. Naiman, who was one of the pioneers in this area talking about this stuff. And I'll tell you, all of these guys, if I reached out to them, every single one, I said, hey, can I use this slide? Here's all my slides I've ever had. Use whatever you want, right? Jason Fung, same thing. Whatever you need, it's not competition. They know they're helping people. And I have emails that seriously made me cry because they said, look, if you're doing the right thing for the patient, the money is secondary. That doesn't matter. do what's right for the patient. So all these guys are the same way. They share their data, even though I may be competition for them someday, right? Because they know we need more doctors to get it. And we have to get doctors to get it. That is going to be the key for everything. And we've missed that part of the equation so far. So this tells us 300 to 500 times more likely to have a heart attack with these things going on, right? All these are related to insulin resistance, by the way. And the cholesterol thing is really hard to understand. I'm going to steal something from Dave Feldman. He's a guy who's going to revolutionize medicine. I'm just going to do this really quickly because Dr. Scher didn't talk about it last time. This guy was going for life insurance. So he said, I'm going to fast for 3 days. And I'm going to show these guys I'm going to get really good cholesterol. I'll get the best life insurance rate. 3 days he fasts. He's a pretty fit guy, a triathlete type guy. LDL cholesterol is a low, borderline 130 all the time. And so he goes in, fasting 3 days, gets his labs back. Doctor calls him, then nurse calls and said, you got to come in today and get your medicine started. His LDL cholesterol went to 210 from 130 every other time to 210 LDL, the bad cholesterol. So he said, that's weird. So he gets all of his meds and he goes home and thought, I wonder what would happen if I just ate pure fat. I wonder how high I can get that to start. I'll just make it go as high as I can, then I'll see how much I could benefit. 3 days. Butter, everything we're told not to eat fat-wise, he eats it. Goes in 3 days, gets his lab test. LDL drops by 90 points, eating a high-fat diet. So he said, I must have some genetic weird thing. So he said, maybe that first test was wrong. He's a scientist, and this guy's really, really good. So he says, okay, I'm going to fast 3 days again, see what happens. Fast 3 days, goes way up to 210 again. I'm going to eat fat again. Doctor says, why do you keep doing this? You're crazy. Does the same thing, drops down again. So it's crazy. He said, we must have some genetic thing in our family. Has his whole family do it. Same results. So then he starts getting his friends, neighbors, people who aren't genetically connected to him. Said, try it yourself. 89% of the time, it works. So it tells us this is a dynamic system. And we're so focused on the bad cholesterol that we miss all the other things, the triglycerides, the HDL, because he makes a really good analogy to, I just heard this the other day. He says, HDL, the higher your HDL, the better your risk factors are for not having a heart attack. You want good HDL, you want that to be high and good. That's why the total cholesterol doesn't mean anything, because your HDL could be super high and protective. Now, it's more complicated than this, but he says, look, pretend like the HDL is like the policemen that are patrolling your neighborhood. When you look outside and you see them all walking around doing nothing, you say, okay, things are pretty good. All of a sudden, all the police are gone. And you say, uh-oh, something's happening. All the police are gone. Why? Right? They're there trying to fix the problem somewhere. So HDL, when it drops down, that's a sign of metabolic derangement. When we say that, we mean that it's putting you at an increased risk of heart attacks and strokes and all that kind of stuff. That's why you want to have a good HDL. So when people say Atkins is crazy, he's raising everyone's cholesterol, look at the ratio between the HDL and the total cholesterol. That's probably our biggest determiner of stroke and heart attack risk, other than high insulin, but they're related. So the higher your insulin goes, the more deranged your metabolic syndrome gets. And that's why we're making this point. Yeah, sorry, I'm known for that. I just had to be an expert witness in court, and the judge scolded me for the same. So what I'm getting at, what he's saying with the HDL cholesterol is this. They're there for a purpose. Our body is making LDL, which we say is a bad cholesterol. Our body's always making it. Why would we make something that's terrible for us? Because we need it. Because testosterone, hormones, all this stuff is based on that. So what we're getting at is looking at the total cholesterol isn't helpful because the HDL is extremely important, because that's kind of like the policemen or firemen that are going out and putting out fires. So when you have a lot of fires going on with inflammation, and inflammation is the key factor, and that sugar and insulin both raise inflammatory markers. So people with rheumatoid arthritis, osteoarthritis, all this kind of stuff do better on a ketogenic diet. The point is, when the HDL starts disappearing, you say, uh-oh, it's doing something. That's why we're not seeing it. And that's what Dave Feldman is talking about, is it's a dynamic system. So we're basing lifelong treatment on the LDL cholesterol. They can change that much in 3 days by what you eat. That's scary to me, right? It's scary as a doctor, because you think, now what? That's why I told Dave Feldman, I said, everything used to be wonderful until you came around and messed up everything, him and another guy, because we said, we used to understand this, and now it's confusing. It's not like we just say, okay, the number's bad, fix it, right? So it changes everything. Why does our body do that in storing fat? That's exactly what it's designed to do. When we get fat, that means our body is helping us, because we leave that sugar there, we're going to die. It's toxic. It's bad. So your body says, oh, let's put it in fat and store it away, so it's not causing damage. It's walled off somewhere. So that's the key. When we get out of the blood system, we're preserving ourselves. So that's kind of the point when we talk about carbs. If you're eating a ton of carbs all the time, 6 times a day, every time you're eating, you're spiking your insulin. Insulin has to go get rid of that sugar that you just ate. So when we say, well, yeah, you got to eat 6 times a day to spark the machine, there's no data that says that, and it's hurting us. I've never met a person yet, and it makes me laugh almost. I've never met the person who comes in and says, Doc, you know what? I used to weigh 300 pounds. Then I started eating 6 times a day, lost 150 pounds, just like that. No one's happened. It's never happened. I've never seen it. But that's the recommendation we're giving people, and that's what makes it kind of nutty, because no one's met that person. And that's what we tell everyone. And so this is how we feel in medicine right now. This is Sisyphus, the guy who has to push the boulder up the hill all the time. That's what we're against, because we see all these diabetics come in with all these disaster problems with neuropathy and ulcers and amputations and dialysis and all this terrible stuff. So our system is dying under the weight of this stuff. And up here, it's not just about diet. See, sugar we talk about, processed foods, anger, resentment, stress, fatigue, not sleeping, fighting with your wife, arguing with people, whatever. And these, you can't see it very well, but down here is the disease processes that are a result. And these diseases are chaining us, so we're just making it worse by having these, diabetes, heartburn, stress, anxiety, can't sleep, because then you can't sleep worse. And we see these cycles that we have to break. I see it all the time. I say, look, you're stressing all the time. Relax. Your headaches are going to get better. Your stomach's going to get better. Your ulcers are going to get better. So this is part of and this is the scope of the problem. 70% of us are overweight. 40% are obese. And some of these are, just to be fair, some of these are a little misleading, because Arnold Schwarzenegger, when he was in his prime, was morbidly obese because he had so much muscle mass. But, you have to look at, there's different ratios we look at more so. 40% of all cancers are just recently saying are associated with obesity. And I would make the argument when they say obesity, they're talking about insulin resistance, but that's not what we're talking about. 65 to 80%, depending on the study, of diabetics are going to die of cardiovascular disease. That is ground shaking. So it's not just saying, my family's from Ohio. I'm going to pick on them because Ohio State beat USC in the bowl game this year. But what they do is they say, well, I have Lipitor. I'll just eat whatever I want. I'll eat take more Lipitor, and then I'll shoot up more insulin to cover the brownies I'm going to eat right now, and then I'll have the cake, and then I'll shoot a little more insulin. But they don't realize the impact that the insulin is what's killing them. It's not the sugar necessarily. And so if you come to me and you're diabetic, your chance of dying of cardiovascular disease is in this range. Disaster story. So the best thing we can do is reverse that, and that's the argument we're making. And that's why I'm spending more time tonight. It's not just our problem, around the world. I kind of made the joke, this is China down here on the bottom, and I said, you know what? We exported our diet to those guys, and we're going to conquer China by killing them with our diet. We said, you guys want Twinkies? Yeah. You want Coke? Sure, we'll send it over, no problem. So it's a disaster. Their system's in turmoil. And then India is the same problem. And so this is what I see. And I want to make this point, too, quickly, is when I'm in Guatemala, El Salvador, Vietnam, everywhere I've been in the world, our first clinic we do way out in the country. Guess what? We don't see diabetes. We don't see heart disease. We don't see hypertension. We see a lot of stress and all this other stuff. But those guys are just eating their normal diet. As you get closer in the city, we start seeing a little bit of diabetes. You get in the city, you see it everywhere. It's a disaster. Because they could go in and no one's going to drive from 4 hours in the country on a horse to go eat McDonald's. But the guys that are right next door to it will eat it. And that's what we're doing. We're doing the same thing. And that's why we see, wherever we have big cities or poverty, we see a lot more obesity, diabetes, and all that because we're trained to eat that kind of food. Fat adaptation, this is what I'm getting at in a long-winded way, is we can burn sugar or we can burn fat. In rare times when we're starving, we're going to digest protein, but we don't want to do that because we want to keep our muscles. Fat's our energy source. Again, this is what we're storing as fat. That's right. If we take too many calories, and there's a big argument about whether calories matter. I think calories are secondary to the metabolic derangement of insulin. Insulin resistance is primary, and then the second thing we have to look at calories, because people think they could eat butter, steak, all this stuff for 9,000 calories a day. Guess what? It's going to be tough, especially if we want to lose weight. Some people are just trying to maintain their weight, and they can do that. If you have insulin sensitivity, again, 1/3 of people have insulin sensitivity, 2/3 have insulin resistance. The older we get, it's like a balloon. The more it starts blowing up, then it gets easier and easier to blow up. That's what we do. That's why we get more obese as we get older, because we become more insulin resistant. So this is why we don't eat fat. It's going to kill you. You're going to block your arteries. All this stuff is going to happen. One of the analogies I've heard, and I would commend everyone to read this book, The Big Fat Surprise. It was a big fat surprise to me, too, because she goes through all the cholesterol data, all this stuff, all this, the special interests that were involved in why we believe what we believe now. Because it's crazy scary for me to say, yeah, eat more saturated fat. Her book says that. And she won like Book of the Year and all this crazy stuff. She's gotten a lot of awards after going through the fire for a long time. So people actually look at the data. She's actually doing a huge amount to change the food pyramid because, like we said, we're not all the same. So to make one food thing for everyone, the best nutritionists in the world cannot do that because we're all different. Someone's going to need more carbs, less carbs, whatever it is, right? So it's ridiculous for the government to say, one size fits all, everyone's going to do this. Doesn't work. So this is my car. I'm showing off. I have a 2012 Chevy Volt. See, when you're a doctor, you get an old car that runs on electricity because you can't afford gas. But it still makes the point. My car, I can ride 37 miles. My office, which is perfect, is like 35 miles. So I still have 2 miles to spare when I get there and plug in there and drive home. And I don't go to the gas station like you guys as much. But I can get like 345 miles on gas. My car will make me use all of my electricity before I get to the gas. It's the same thing with our body. If you're eating a high-carb, high-fat diet, your body will metabolize the sugar first before it gets to the fat. So if you're eating a ton of sugar and a ton of fat, guess what? You're not burning fat as your fuel source, you're burning sugar as your fuel source. That's why we're dependent on it, because we love carbs. We're like, oh, I can never give up my carbs. Well, this is what's happening if you don't. It's going to be a problem. And, by the way, alcohol gets metabolized before sugar. So if you drink a ton of alcohol at night, you're going to metabolize every drop of that before you start metabolizing. Otherwise, your body's going to wall off that sugar and get rid of it and store it as fat. That's why people who drink a lot will get a fat belly around the middle. That's why. But whenever electricity is available, my car will use that first. I can't use my gas until my electricity. I think the newer versions can do both, but that's it. So if I'm doing a long trip, like Mr. Waddell over there, if he's running an ultra marathon, my sugar can only last for so long. I could probably get 1 hour of sugar energy. Then I got to switch over to fat burning mode. So the argument becomes, why don't we just start on fat burning mode already and not switch over and make our body confused and hit the wall and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of people are talking about that, doing that. So cavemen, like I already told you, this is what they're doing. They would feast and famine. That's why in religion we feast and famine. You eat like crazy, then you don't eat. And that's a lot better than a calorie-restricted diet chronically. It's like if you get a pay cut forever, you have to start cutting your electric bill and you stop using stuff and you turn off the air conditioner when it's hot because you know you only have so much money to pay your bills. With intermittent fasting, the benefit is your body doesn't know what's coming. It doesn't know if you're going to fast a day or not fast. It doesn't know whether to shut your energy down. As a matter of fact, the interesting thing that argues against your body going into shock mode when you skip a meal is if you fast for 1 day, the next morning, your metabolism is 15% higher than it was the previous day. Because your body says, uh-oh, something's wrong. I better start breaking down this fat and using it as an energy source, and that's the point. These guys would be out hunting for 5 or 6 days. If we got weak when we were hunting, we'd all be dead because we wouldn't be able to go kill the other animal. Again, every religion fasts. Why do we do it? To make us confused, weak days, and so we can't think for ourselves? No, it's to make us focus and stronger. That's why Chuck says when I'm fasting, I'm that much better. I can focus better. When I say stuff, people listen to me. They never did before. When I was praying and fasting, Mr. Cotterman back there changed his whole thing of 27 years. The 2 keto dudes call me. I'm nobody. I haven't written a book. I have like 300 followers on Twitter, and they asked me to be on their show. That's crazy stuff that happens. Having Rachel Gregory, who's not here tonight, but she's speaking next week, and it's worth getting through me and Dr. Scher to hear her. She's an expert. She moved from Florida here like a month ago. I'm like, hey, do you want to come speak for us? That would be great, right? And so all these people come together. The Low Carb USA guys, I reach out to them. They draw the community together. We meet some of the top researchers in the world that say, we believe in what you're doing. We want to come see what you're doing, and we want to help out. I become friends with my mentor, Jason Fung. He's reached out to me and helped me. And so it's just a lot of great stuff that's happening. It's unbelievable. The fact that all you guys are here, it's kind of fun because my pastor said, you might get 50 people, right? Because it's like taxes. No one wants to talk about tithing and taxes. If we start handing out baskets, everyone's going to freak out here. But the point is, it's like that. It's a hard sell. So, but the point is, when it does, it's not about sacrificing and being miserable for God that He's going to do something back for you. You're in a state where you can really focus and listen. That is the point of what we're doing here for a lot of people. And even if you don't believe what we believe, the point is, will it make you a better husband to focus on how do I, positive stuff and good stuff, not the negativity that we're dished out all the time on the news and everywhere else. Same thing. So this is the point I'm making. We chop firewood all summer, and we save it for energy. Then the winter comes, and we say, well, furniture's our muscle tissue. So it gets cold outside like twice a year in San Diego, and if we want to make a fire, would you say, hey, I'm just going to throw all my bed and everything in the fire, or are you going to throw the wood that you've been cutting all winter long, or summer long for the winter? It doesn't make sense. What people say, you're going to lose all your muscle mass. First of all, ketosis is a protective state for muscle tissue. So even if you're not taking this stuff, ketosis makes you less likely to burn your muscle as a fuel source. When you have all this fat sitting around, you're going to use it. Just makes sense. There's no survival benefit of burning your muscle away so you can't function. So I say God is smarter than that. We're designed better than that. We're not designed that every 2 hours we have to eat or we're going to die. It's just not. The Navy SEALs are on a ketogenic diet, by the way. Why? They can go hide in the jungle for 5 days and not eat. And they go, okay, no problem, digesting my fat. I'll lay here. Why are you going to open Doritos while they're out there and the guys are trying to shoot them? It doesn't make sense, right? So the NASA astronauts, if they get stuck out there, they go, no problem, I'm not eating today, right? Chuck knows a lot of us who fast, like Mondays, I haven't eaten today, by the way. So Mondays, so if I say dumb stuff, I have an excuse at least. But Mondays generally fast. Jason Fung fasts 2 or 3 days a week. That's what he does. And he eats the rest of the time. He goes home and has dinner. Usually he eats dinner with his family, things like that. If I could ever get out of my office in time, I'll eat dinner with my family too. Yeah, Kevin Miller's in our church. He's like an ultra marathon athlete. He doesn't have any fat on him, so I'm not sure if he can do this stuff. Oh, and by the way, that reminds me. Kevin Miller's giving a class on Sunday mornings. He's excellent. It's going to dovetail what we're doing, hearing God's voice. Does anyone go to that class here? Or like tell me what room, do you know what room it's in and stuff? Yeah, so Sunday mornings, because well, I thought Sunday mornings were more crowded than this, but if people want to go to Sunday mornings to his class, he's a great guy and it's really good, so I would highly recommend that. So it's at 9 o'clock, the same time as this class is on Sunday morning, so we're kind of competing with each other. But we have so many people that it would be good because we have 2 nights available, and he only has that one morning, so it would be good for people to go that want to go see him. And then Monday night, I like Monday night better because we don't have to rush as much too, and we kind of figured all the dumb stuff we did on Sunday that we can probably hopefully make it better. I know you're not going to believe it was worse yesterday, but it actually was, I think. So bears, this is the point, bears. I think they're a good point because bears eat fruit. When? Right before they're going to hibernate because they fatten up with fruit. They only do it in the summertime. In the winter, there's no fruit to eat. So we say, well, fruit's good for you. But the point is, this guy is going to go sleep, and he's going to melt away all of his fat while he sleeps. He's pretty lucky. Then he'll wake up and go out and kill stuff again because he's not weak. His fat's gone. His skin's hanging off and loose and all that stuff. But he's not eating that stuff all year round like we are because they don't have credit cards to import stuff from Ecuador and South America and wherever else we get all of our mangoes and all that, you know? So this is a key. I didn't make this much of a point. Dr. Yudkin, he says sugar is the problem. He was right, but he wasn't a big, vocal, loud guy, so he got beat up by this guy, Ansel Keys, who says fat is the problem. And I need to make the point, and I think I will on this next slide. Eisenhower, he changed the course of what we're talking about. This is why we're talking about fat today. Because 1955, he had a huge heart attack while in office, I think the first time in the history of the country that I know of. Went on a low-fat diet right away. I said, fat's the problem, because Ansel Keys said, fat's the problem. You got to get that out of your diet. That's what's causing the trouble. Suffered a stroke in 1957 on a low-fat diet, vegan diet. April through August has all these heart attacks, 14 cardiac arrests. I mean, the guy was pretty durable, I guess, right? Died in 1969 from multiple cardiovascular causes. So, minor details. 4 packs of cigarettes a day, 15 cups of coffee, fairly stressful job as President of the United States. So this is what we're talking about. It's not just about what you eat. There's a lot of other factors, and so many of these studies are so messed up because we do it that way and we don't understand. And had Crohn's disease, which is chronic inflammatory, and this is what we're getting at. You cut your insulin, you cut your carbs, your inflammatory markers go down. Cardiac CRP is something that's is probably beyond the scope. But that's an indicator of cardiac disease. So the higher it is, the higher your inflammation, higher risk of heart attack. A lot of us believe that statin drugs work by decreasing inflammation in the coronary vessels. So by decreasing inflammation, you're decreasing your risk of heart attack. A lot of the times when we look at the studies, and we'll go through it very briefly, is LDL is not in the equation a lot of times when someone has a heart attack, and that's what we care about. I don't care what your cholesterol is if you're not having a heart attack. That's the point. So he wasn't smoking Camels because back then we knew, and coronary is not just based on diet, like we said. See, us doctors were pretty smart. So we knew that if you smoke Camels, you're going to be all right. See, and And Dr. Noakes, who I'm going to talk about briefly, he made a graph, and you see what smoking did and what heart disease did. Guess what? It's a perfect correlation. They follow each other perfectly. So we said, well, what's killing these guys? It can't be it's got to be that. It's got to be the steak that he had, right? Another doctor, same thing. So, Chuck, you're up, man. So this is kind of the point I'm making, and all of us are making here.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me, and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's gonna stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever gonna stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
No, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like, there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. If you would just...
Don't.
Try to see things my way. Do I have to keep on talking till I can't go on? We can work it out.
But that's the point of what we're seeing. We see the nail, and we miss. A lot of us don't see the nail. We don't understand what the nail is, but we see everyone's getting more obese. We're having more heart attacks. We're having all these problems, and we say, "I don't know what it is. What could it be?" I don't know. It's crazy. You think it's the air? You think it's the light? Right? We're missing the obvious thing. Like that 4 packs of cigarettes is an obvious thing now to us, but back then it wasn't obvious. They didn't say, "Wow, poor guy got bad luck," right? So, Chuck, are you shutting me down, man? All right. Oh, I'm back. All right. So the scientific method. Here's the point. This is what Ansel Keys meant. He had an idea in his head. He said, I'm going to prove this to be the point. And a scientist's job is to disprove what they believe. We don't do that anymore. If I believe in global warming, I fudge the data. And I know a guy who did a lot of the review of the data. He said, you will not. And he believes in it. But he said, these guys are a disaster. The data they have is terrible. There's a lot of stuff they have. They're taking readings off the ship engine and crazy stuff. That the heat's coming from the engine, not the environment. So there's a lot of data where they say, wow, we just lost all the data, so just do what we did an analysis for you. No, I want to see the raw data. And this guy, I like him because, again, you have to disprove what you believe. Or what you have to do is try to disprove it. And when you can't disprove it, you know it's true, right? Instead of saying, I already know this is true, and I'm just going to. So that's what we do with everything. If I'm a Christian, I don't want to hear anything that's outside. But I think it's important when I hear someone says, it's scary what you're talking about. Let's debate it. Okay, good, let's debate it. Because then we can see what we believe. So a Christian knows when you're in the fire and you're the only one who believes what you believe, it's fun. Because then you kind of learn what you believe. You say, I don't know the answer to that. And you kind of have to go back and look at it again. Or whatever we believe. And so we've been doing the wrong thing. And this guy, Chad Macias, I just had dinner with him, and he's one of them. You think this stuff we're telling you is over your head? I had to sit there for a day or two and try to reflect. He does research on different tumors and all this kind of stuff. And he's kind of famous for throwing oil and what's the fly in the ointment or whatever. He makes things difficult for people. So he comes out and he picks on some of the guys I really like and says their data's terrible and here's why. I've looked at it. Young guy, he was an Olympic boxer, super, super, super bright guy. But he says, my job is to do, and this is what he tells me, my job is to do everything in my power to disprove what you're doing. I'm like, you don't sound like a very good friend, right? But the point is, I haven't been able to disprove it yet. So I asked him, what diet do you follow? He says, low-carb diet. Why? It's the only one that makes any sense. And I've looked at it. And so he's not a guy who's going to sell it, and he's very ethical and a good guy. So there's our food pyramid I'm telling you about. Hey, eat all carbs, guys, right? Eat carbs. This is a good thing. Oh, by the way, Kellogg's is paying some money, and the bread companies paying some money to make up these guidelines. It's the same thing everywhere. In South Africa, it's been a big deal where the sugar industry is paying for their food guidelines, and they say, well, isn't this a conflict of interest, guys, where you're telling us to sell your product, right? So that's the thing. You have to look at someone's motive and what they're doing. So then we say, next, then eat a bunch of fruits, right? We already know insulin resistance is the problem, so we tell you to eat fruits and stuff that spikes your insulin. So we look at that, and then we see what's happening, and we say, okay, where's the fruit of this? Ansel Keys, the guy I told you about, he wrote the 7-country study. Great. Shows more fat they eat, the more heart attacks they have. But he started out with 22 countries. So instead of including all 22 countries, and when you do, everything falls out, and it's terrible, there's no association, he dropped all the countries that had high fat with no heart attacks, like France. He doesn't like France at all because he can't explain France, because France has the highest fat intake and the lowest heart attack risk, right? So it just doesn't, so he said, I don't like that one. I'm going to leave that one out, this one. Instead of giving us all the data and saying, I don't know why this doesn't make sense, guys, but it's not exactly what I thought it would be. That's what a scientist does. So we got stuff dropped out, so everyone quoted this guy forever, and all these guys came out later and said, BS, not true, not true. So this is a key for me, too. This is where our food guidelines came out, right here. So do you see this line go straight up like that? That's our obesity and diabetes and all that kind of stuff. So the problem is, not that people don't listen, the problem is that they did listen to us. And that's the next thing we see is saturated fat way down, total fat, saturated fat, carbs going up, heart attacks going up. Is fat the problem? These are our best of our best, our military. This is the obesity rate that's happening, following the guidelines. So what doctor, you're telling me to eat more fat? Really? And you tell me to eat less? Yeah, I am. And isn't that outside the standard of care? This is the dangerous part for us. There's a standard of care. When you're outside the standard of care, you put yourself at risk, right? So what do? We just toe the line, or we just say, okay, even though it's crazy and we just keep doing it? That's what we're doing a lot of times because we're afraid. No one wants to stand out because the guys who stood out are really getting in trouble. And you have to say where the guidelines getting us. That's the bottom line. So guys have fought it to the Supreme Court. These are just numbers. No one has to worry about the numbers, but it's a big problem, trust me. In our practice, you look around, $850 billion a year we're paying, right, for diabetes complications. It's a total disaster. $693 million by 2045. Big problems. You wonder why it's not because of Obamacare. It's because we're taking too much out of the system. Because dialysis costs money, amputations cost money, cardiac catheterizations cost money, bypass surgeries cost money. So if we can prevent it, heck, we should put the money into preventing that stuff. Dr. Kraft, this guy convinced me, and I don't want to go too much into the science, but basically he did over 3,000 autopsies over 40 years or so, and his number one conclusion in a book that he wrote in 2008 at 86 years of age was when he went to look at all the risk factors. He says the number one risk factor is insulin levels. All these guys who had heart attacks, strokes, and peripheral vascular disease, all this bad stuff, had high insulin levels. LDL, minimal factor compared to insulin. That's why we're hammering the insulin point right now. That's why I want to make that point. We're worried about our heart, say, don't eat fat because you're going to have a heart attack. That's not what the data or anything shows. So at some point we have to look at the data, not what our neighbor or friend or everyone else says. And so he said they either had diabetes, pre-diabetes, or no one made the diagnosis. That is what changed my career right there. Because now I check insulin on my patients. That's what every single doctor should be doing, and every doctor I talk to, I will tell them that. Check an insulin level on your patients. It's going to tell you where they're at. That's the check engine light. Because if you have super high insulin, it's not if, it's when you get diabetes. I'm telling you, as sure as I stand here, if you do not fix the underlying problem, you will have diabetes because it's not going to get better. You're already insulin resistant. It's going to get worse and worse and worse. So that's where I have to sit down and go, now it's personal responsibility because the more carbs you can't give up your donuts, guess what? Your insulin resistant already is not going to get better. You're gonna tire your body out. It's just like you can't leave your refrigerator door open all night. You don't go to Las Vegas and just step on the throttle all the way because you're going to blow up your engine. You cannot run it that way. So the pancreas needs to rest. So the point I tell my patients is, if you're eating every 2 hours and you're doing all this stuff, your pancreas is working out all day. It's making insulin. So sooner or later it starts making bad insulin. It's just throwing out insulin, just whatever. It's overworked. So it's got to rest. That's where fasting comes in, because fasting allows you to rest your pancreas during that time you're not eating. So your pancreas is like, oh, thank you. So if you've been running all day and your husband comes home or wife comes home and says, let's go for a jog, you're like, I've been running all day, I don't want to run anymore. But if you've been watching TV all day and you say, yeah, let's go for a jog, that's what your pancreas is saying. Please, give me a break, let me rest. Because we're all fasting when we sleep, so you extend that out a little bit here and a little bit there, and it makes a difference. And we're not going to go into the details of that, but people down the road are going to talk about that. So I'm just laying the foundation. All I have to do is can change everything you've ever thought. That's all I have to do in this short time. This guy sent a book to every medical center in the United States. Says, guys, this is important stuff. Guess how many phone calls he got? 0. It was outside the paradigm. No one wanted to hear it. Even though he said, I stuck my fingers in these arteries, I've looked at all this stuff, I've seen it myself. These guys sit in the ivory tower and say, no, we just believe what we believe. We don't want to hear what you're saying. So this guy named Ivor Cummins, who we're going to see, this guy, Irishman, was doing the same kind of research and seeing the same stuff. And so someone dropped this book on his desk, and he looked at it, and he said, He was upset because he said, I'm working on all this stuff, and some guy 8 years ago invented it. I've never heard of this before, right? Then he said, well, at least someone agrees with me, one person, this guy. So he flew to America to meet this guy before he passed away late last year at 97 years old, 96 or 97 years old. So apparently he knew something. This guy helped convince me too. This guy went to the Supreme Court in South Africa, fought him because he said, he wrote The Law of Running, the #1 textbook in the history of running, saying carb load in the 70s. Ran, great shape, did all this stuff. As he got older, he started gaining weight. So he said, no problem, I'll run more, just like we all do. I'll exercise more, eat less. Wasn't losing weight, he was frustrated. So he said, I wonder about those crazy guys in America doing this Atkins stuff. He loses 18 pounds, something of that nature, in 1 month. So I said, maybe there's something, because he had the courage to try it. So once he did, he started doing research. These guys, Finney and Volek and all these guys out here, and he reversed himself. He fought to the Supreme Court because they said, look, shut up, don't talk about this stuff anymore. And he said, I have to. So this guy, Dr. Fetke, same thing, orthopedic surgeon, tired of amputating feet, said, guys, we got to cut the carbs. They said, you're a doctor, don't talk about nutrition. We don't want to hear it. Stop saying it. So he's frustrated, so he's fighting them. All these guys have fought battles, and these are the people I trust. I see them. These guys aren't selling me a product. They don't have any vested interest. Drug companies surely are not giving them money. So I have to look at someone's integrity and where the money's coming from, unfortunately. So what do these things have to do with fasting? Again, fasting decreases your hunger. When you fast, people are generally not hungry. What I'm getting at is that when you go on a high-fat diet, it makes fasting very easy because your body's used to burning fat. So it doesn't care if you're eating a cheeseburger that you are wrapped in lettuce, hopefully, or burning fat from Krispy Kremes a few years ago again. Your body has an energy source, it's happy. That's why Chuck can go so long fasting without being freaked out. And that's why people can do that. And you could focus on God and praying instead of cooking breakfast and thinking what you're going to have for lunch and stressing out about stuff. For me, I used to just shove down a lunch. I would just say, I got to eat something. I'm going to shut my metabolism. I'm going to just shove something down. A lot of us do that. We don't even enjoy it. We're just shoving something down to have something. Give me a bar. Give me all this processed stuff that I'm going to eat. So say, no, if I'm not hungry, I'm not going to eat. And listening to your body and understanding of your stress and all that kind of stuff is really important. Again, Navy SEALs, all these guys are doing this kind of stuff. And these are just studies. Dr. Scher does a great job of this. So basically, they look at all this stuff and all these guys. Basically, instead of going through this for the sake of time, all these studies are meta-analysis looking at the data saying people who eat more fat are not dying of more heart attacks. Over and over and over again. No difference, again, if they eat more saturated fat or not. So here's another one, same thing. No association between saturated fat, right? 347,000 people over 5 to 23 years. They look at all these data. They're not seeing an association that we all seem to see. Am I missing something here? Pure study, and the one that just came out, again, is a diet stuff, and these are not the best studies, but again, they looked at these guys, 10 years, 135,000 people, 18 countries, 5 continents, better than the 7 countries that everyone talks about. These guys had 18, right? High carbohydrate intake was associated with higher risk of total mortality, whereas total fat and individual types of fat were related to lower total mortality. Are we doing the wrong thing? Ansel Keys. Another one, these are just more things. This is kind of crazy to me too, right? 80% of elderly people studied, those with higher levels of LDL, which is the bad cholesterol we're talking about, live longer than those with lower levels. So let's lower the cholesterol really quickly so we save their lives by lowering their cholesterol that's killing them. So this is stuff I don't like to see because then I say, what do I do with this, right? Dr. Scher, the same thing. We scratch our head and say, what do we do with this? Again, this is another important point. I'll make it quickly, but same thing. 541 hospitals, 136,000 people. The study found that 75% of people in the hospital for heart attacks had cholesterol at or below the guidelines. So we say, hey, you're good, go off. Then you have a heart attack, and they say, well, my doctor said everything was good, I had a heart attack, how did that happen? But most of these guys had derangements of HDL, the police officers that go and keep the neighborhood safe. When they're used up and your triglycerides are high, you're in a bad neighborhood, you better watch out. And so are we putting too much faith in LDL? I can't give medical advice, but that's the data. And again, this is one last little thing. This is the cholesterol. You can't really see it very well. It doesn't project well. But this is the LDL of 130 or less, that bad cholesterol. This is higher cholesterol. The point being made here is this is insulin resistance. So as we move from here to here, the insulin level is higher. So with my same cholesterol level here, the more insulin resistant, that's my risk of heart attack goes up that high than if I'm insulin sensitive. For the same cholesterol, does that make sense? So if my LDL cholesterol is that much higher, but I'm insulin sensitive right here, my risk is way lower than the guy with lower LDL cholesterol. And we're putting all of our faith in that one number. And this is what we do when you do keto without having someone help you, because people are going to eat high fat, they're going to do all this stuff, and then they're going to get into trouble. That's my dog, that's my website. She's keeping us up all night. And now you survive me. Dr. Scher, sorry, man. I know, but I wanted to make those points and make sure it was clear because it's a lot of data. Dr. Scher is an expert cardiovascular disease. I trained with him at Mercy Hospital. He was the chief resident the year before me. I've always respected him a great deal. We went 12 years without seeing each other. He went to Stanford and, sorry, man. And this terrible place called Ohio State that beat up on USC this year. But he's a well-trained guy. My chiropractor, Dr. Grant, was kind enough to give me his book, and I said, I don't like reading doctor's book. It upsets me most of the time. And then I saw it was him. I said, oh, now I got to see what this guy says. So I started looking at his podcast, which is called Boundless Health. I would highly recommend it. I use it all the time with my patients. It's an excellent resource. And he talked, because he's not just sold on this one concept. He's looking at veganism, this, to see how we give you the best health. His book is called The Best Health Ever, and it's really, I hate to say it in front of him, but it's really well done. Oh, and so I'm honored to have you here. And when I asked him to come speak, he's a busy guy. He has a lot going on. He's a busy cardiologist, and I kept him over, and I apologize. But he said, yeah, I'll be there. He didn't say, how much are you going to pay me? What do I get out of it? Can I advertise? And no, he said, I'll be there. I'll do it because it's important.
Wait,
so
you're
all
not
these
paying
guys.
Me?
No, you're not getting paid. Sorry to break it to you, man. Thank you. I might have to now. Oh, here's some water. There's a water right there for you.
Okay, thank you.
I'll take mine.
All right, so
Thanks,
first,
man.
that's a tough act to follow, following Brian. So we got to reset our sensors here. So everybody stand up for a second. It's a health talk after all, so we got to stretch. All right, shake everything out a little bit. Reach up for the sky. Reach your head up high. Get their shoulder blades back. Suck that belly in. Maybe do a couple squats or something. All right, not going to lead an aerobics class, so that's good for now. All right, but as Brian mentioned, I'm a cardiologist. We trained together at Mercy Hospital for internal medicine residency. I then went on to Scripps Clinic and did a preventative cardiology fellowship, and then went into practice. And there's so much excitement when you get into practice. I was in the cath lab. I was helping people with blocked arteries. I was giving people statins and telling them to eat low-fat diets and really feeling like I'm going to make an impact here. And then it didn't take long to realize there was sort of this revolving door, and the same people are coming back again, and the same people. And when they're following your advice, when they're on the drugs, we weren't really solving the problem. And it kind of forced me to say, well, wait a second, what's going on here? I mean, I went into cardiology to really help people, and I didn't feel like I was doing that. And that's when I started to take a deeper dive, and that's when the whole concept of where our information came from and how we have been sort of led down the wrong path came. And Brian did a great job of explaining that, so I'll try not to get into that too much. But what he asked me to talk about today was the role of cholesterol. And because when we talk about eating fat, right away we think I'm going to die of heart disease, my cholesterol is going to go through the roof. And that's not just what sort of lay people think, the average person thinks. That's what your doctor is going to think too. And so I wanted to dispel a couple myths and talk about this today. So first, fats and lipids, what do they mean to me? Because for each and every one of us, it's going to be different, and that's part of the key. That's why my title says, what does it mean to me? And by me, I mean you, because it's not going to be the same for everybody, and here's going to be why. So first, when you talk about the benefits of a low-carb lifestyle, there are so many of them. You're going to improve your insulin sensitivity and glucose control, like Brian talked about. You can treat and reverse diabetes. You can reverse the metabolic syndrome. You're going to lose weight. You're going to improve your energy and decrease your hunger. So why wouldn't every doctor in the world want you doing these things? It's that fear. We're told that we shouldn't be eating fat because it's a fear that it's going to increase our cholesterol. And when we look at, so disclaimer, some of these slides might be a little hard to see. I apologize. I'll do my best to talk you through them. So the low-carb, high-fat diet versus the low-fat diet. And what you can see, here are the keys. This is triglycerides on a low-carb diet. So much lower than a low-fat diet. HDL, so much higher compared to the low-fat diet. And here's the triglyceride to HDL ratio. So much better. And we're going to get back to this slide, but I wanted to plant this seed in your head to show you there's a significant difference in these markers on a low-carb diet. And so the concern is, like I mentioned, that eating more fat will increase your cholesterol and put you at higher risk. So if your doctor tells you that, the next question should be, well, why is that? What's your evidence behind that? And what do you know about the ratios and the difference of your cholesterol? And usually you get sort of a blank stare. And it's not necessarily the fault of your doctor because we're trained to follow guidelines. There's so much information out there in the medical world that the experts put together guidelines to make it much easier for us. So we know if we're following these guidelines, we're doing what's right. We're not trained to take a deeper dive into the information behind it. And that's where some of these people that Brian mentioned, like Ivor Cummins or Dave Feldman, they're engineers. They haven't been indoctrinated with these guidelines that we have. So they say, well, whoa, let's take a closer look at this. And let's find out why. And let's find out how this is made. And they're the ones who are helping revolutionize this. And that's what we need more doctors to know about. So you don't get that blank stare of just saying, well, this is what the guidelines say. We need to know more about it. So here is possibly one of the more important slides that I'm going to show tonight. These are all the published studies on the long-term impact of elevated lipids when you're following a low-carb lifestyle or if you have optimal insulin sensitivity. Okay, all the long-term studies showing the impact of elevated lipids or elevated cholesterol. There it is. All right. So I worked hard on this slide, okay? I did a lot of research. Took me a long time. It hasn't been studied. All the studies that are out there that have looked at the impact of cholesterol and lipids on your cardiovascular risk have all been done on either the low-fat diet or even worse, the standard American diet. This hasn't been studied. So you could say there are two ways to interpret the slide. Wait a second, it's a blank slide. How can there be two ways to interpret it? But there are. You could say, well, if it hasn't been studied, well, then maybe it is still dangerous and maybe I shouldn't follow it. Or you could say, well, if it hasn't been studied, maybe there's something there to say it would be different. Now, just because it hasn't been studied doesn't automatically make it better, right? The impact of cholesterol hasn't been studied on left-handed redheads born the second week in January. But there's no reason to think that'd be any different than right-handed blondes born the third week of January. There's no mechanism behind that. But with the low-carb, high-fat lifestyle, there is that mechanism. There are plenty of reasons to think that it would be different, and that's what I intend to show you today. So to skip to the take-homes, the impact of LDL is not the same for all individuals. That's why I titled this, What Does It Mean to Me? What does it mean to each individual? Because when you factor in your metabolic health, your HDL, your insulin sensitivity, even the size and density of your LDL, all that and inflammation as well is going to impact what the LDL means. The second take-home, though, is cardiovascular disease is not multifactorial. So we're talking about LDL because that's what is out there. That's what the message we're hearing. But LDL does not mean heart attacks. Heart attacks do not mean LDL. They're not one and the same. Cardiovascular disease is multifactorial. Insulin resistance, inflammation, oxidation, endothelial dysfunction. Something has to cause vascular damage before you can start to get cardiovascular disease. Having a high LDL does not by itself cause vascular damage. LDL is one small risk factor, but it's a small risk factor that we can treat with drugs and make drug companies lots of money and make everybody happy because you're getting a small benefit. It's not the only cause. So the second take-home is cardiovascular disease is multifactorial. So if LDL was the main cause of heart disease, you would expect when you look at a graph of the average LDL of people hospitalized for a heart attack, they would all be over here in the 200 range and the 180 range. Well, that's not what this graph looks like. In fact, the average LDL of people hospitalized for heart attacks is somewhere in this like 70 to 130 range, and really in like the 80, 90, 100, 110 range. These are so-called normal LDL cholesterol levels, but this is what the majority of people having heart attacks have for their LDL. And this is not sort of archaic information. This is out there that anybody can find. People are just choosing not to look at it, because this slide by itself is pretty clear that LDL is not the only problem here. Here's another study, a little complicated, but focus on this part right here. Okay, this is death going up this way, so you don't want to be up high, and this is cholesterol increasing this way. And look where the highest point is, on a low level of cholesterol. Right? This equates to about 100 milligrams per deciliter, and then it goes down as cholesterol goes higher, and then finally goes up a little bit here at the end. But it's not a straight line that you would expect if cholesterol was the issue. So this is similar to that study that Brian mentioned. It was studied in elderly folks, which were defined as over 60, and associating their cholesterol levels with their risk of death. And it's clearly not a one-issue problem here. All right, then you may have heard of the Framingham study. This was one of the original studies that followed people for decades to see what is going to make them at risk for heart disease. And their conclusion was LDL is one of the big ones. Well, so was smoking and high blood pressure. But this is where a lot of the LDL hypothesis came from. And this is the data that, again, isn't hard to find, just people don't look at it. So here you have LDL of 100, LDL of 220. Okay, so this is LDL increasing. Here you have HDL of 85, HDL of 25, so HDL decreasing. So if you look at low LDL, high HDL, that would be this one right here, that's your lowest risk. If you look at high LDL and low HDL, that's your highest risk. Those make sense. But now look at this. Here's your low LDL with your low HDL. That's a pretty high risk with the low LDL. So if we look at the high LDL, it must be much higher, right? High LDL, high HDL, it's lower. So the LDL of 220 compared to the LDL of 100, your risk of heart disease is less than half when your HDL is higher. So again, it's not just the LDL. The LDL exists in your body. What's going on in your body is going to affect the characteristics of that LDL, and it's going to affect whether your body has the substrate that LDL can cause damage. So think of an infection, right? You get an infection, you get a bad pneumonia. Your white blood cells are going to skyrocket. So if you were looking down from outer space and you just said, look, everybody who has pneumonia and a bad infection has high white blood cells. Maybe the white blood cells are the problem. We should treat the white blood cells. Not the case. They're going in there for repair. Well, LDL has a reparative role. It's one of the roles of LDL. It's crucial for cell membranes. It's crucial for the neurons in our brains. It's crucial for our hormones and our fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin D. LDL has all these roles, plus repairing vascular damage. So if you have vascular damage, the LDL may start rushing in to that vessel to help repair it. Well, the same way white blood cells can cause an abscess and can actually cause damage, it's sort of a reparative mechanism gone awry, the same can be true for the LDL. But only if you give it that substrate, only if you have that vascular damage and the LDL exists in a way where it can do damage. And that's where you have to start factoring in the HDL, the triglycerides, and your metabolic health. This one's a little confusing, sorry, I'll pass that. Okay, so now back to this slide. Well, what gives LDL a better environment? Lower triglycerides, boom. Low carb, high fat diet has it. High HDL, boom. Low carb, high fat diet has it. Triglycerides to HDL ratio, boom. Low carb, high fat diet has it. The ApoB to ApoA1 is like a LDL to HDL ratio basically, and that goes down because you have higher HDL, lower LDL. So these markers that change better with a low carb diet are those same markers that tell us cholesterol is not so important. So not having studies in what did I say, redheaded, left-handed people the second week of January? I think that's what I said. I think that was, not having studies in those people doesn't tell us much. But not having long-term studies on the impact of a low-carb, high-fat diet does tell us something, because we have all this evidence to tell us, well, yes, it should be different. Not only could it be different, but it absolutely should be different, because we're improving the metabolic health of our body. Now, it's not all about cholesterol either. So here, just focus on this blue line here. This is your hemoglobin A1C as it increases from 4 up to 8, and this is your risk of a heart attack from this trial called EPIC. And as you can see right away, even as you get to 5, a little bit over 5, it's starting to increase, and then here at about 6.5, it skyrockets. So hemoglobin A1C is a clear predictor. And for those who don't know, hemoglobin A1C is basically a marker of your average blood sugar over the past 3 months. So higher blood sugar, higher cardiovascular risk. So LDL is not the only issue. Cholesterol is not the only issue. What about inflammation? Brian briefly mentioned the CRP. A high sensitivity CRP is a measurement of inflammation in our bodies. So looking at this slide over here, this is your cholesterol. Again, lower cholesterol here, less than 130. Higher here, greater than 160. And the dark line is with a higher inflammation. But here you go, low cholesterol, high inflammation. Your risk is higher than high cholesterol and low inflammation. So not just cholesterol, not just blood sugar, also inflammation. We're starting to find more and more things that we need to worry about. So an LDL is not an LDL is not an LDL. I can't hammer that home enough. It's more or less associated with heart disease depending on what's going on in your body. Okay, but wait, doesn't lowering LDL save lives, right? We're told time and time again, we need to take our statins because lowering LDL saves lives. And that's partly true. In secondary prevention, so the definition of secondary prevention is someone who's had a heart attack, had a stroke, had a stent, had bypass surgery. They've got vascular disease, cardiovascular disease already. If we put those people on statins and we treat 83 of them for 5 years, we will save 1 life. So statins save lives, sort of. If we treat 39 people for 5 years, we'll prevent 1 heart attack. And this is not cherry-picking the data. This is data that's out there looking at all the studies. The way they get around this is the relative risk versus the absolute risk. So here's an example. Your chance of winning the lottery is, say, 1 in a million, right? So you can buy a ticket for $1. Well, I've got a deal for you. I'm going to increase your chance by 100% and sell you that ticket for $10. Deal? Who's with me? Who wants it? I've got it right here. Because now your chance is 2 in a million. But that's 100% difference. So the drug companies promote their studies saying there's a 30% reduction in heart attacks. And that's true. When you look at the relative risk, it's a 30% reduction. And most of them show a 1% absolute reduction or somewhere along those lines. And that's where these numbers come from, that treating 83 people for 5 years saves 1 life. And that's for people who already have disease. So now let's talk about people who don't already have disease. That's primary prevention. Now we're treating 60 people for 5 years to save 1 heart attack with no difference in who lives or dies. And if you're a lower risk primary prevention, so people who have 0 risk factors for heart disease, you have to treat 217 for 5 years to save 1 heart attack with no difference in who lives or dies. So all of a sudden, you got to start to question why we're pushing statins so much and not talking about other things like different lifestyle interventions like the low-carb lifestyle. And we mentioned inflammation. Statins also lower inflammation. So this is where the LDL hypothesis really breaks down and runs into criticism, because if you're lowering inflammation and lowering the LDL, you can't say it's the LDL. So what else can you do to lower inflammation? Well, you can sleep better, you can manage your stress, you can move your body regularly, and you can get those carbohydrates and the sugar and the processed food out of your diet. And trust me, that feels better than taking a statin. Sure does. So again, all those studies on statins, all the statin studies were done on either a low-fat or a standard American diet. So there's even some information out there to suggest if you're on a healthier diet that the statins have even less effect than those that are out there, than those that I showed. Now, that's not to say LDL is completely unimportant and has no role or no association. This is a study that recently came out that a lot of the people in favor of the LDL hypothesis have been putting all over social media. And what they did was they took people, primary prevention, no cardiovascular disease, they checked their blood for their cholesterol levels. Nobody's on any drugs either. This is just all natural. And then they did a carotid ultrasound to look at the thickness of their carotid wall, or they did a coronary calcium score, which are markers of subclinical atherosclerosis, meaning you've got some changes to suggest there's some atherosclerotic process, even though you haven't manifested the disease. Okay? What they found is people with low cholesterol here increasing this way. The red's where you want to be. The red is no evidence of disease. So there's a clear trend as the LDL goes up, the amount of people with no disease goes down. And this is gray is a little bit of disease, yellow is moderate disease, blue is a lot of disease. And that increases as LDL goes up. So taken at face value, this says, okay, this goes against everything I just said because clearly LDL is important. But here's the crazy part about this study that I think identifies sort of what's wrong with society and what's wrong with medicine in general. They define these normal subjects, low risk, normal subjects, as having a fasting blood sugar of 126 and a blood pressure of 140/90. Now, to put those numbers in perspective, that's defined as prediabetes and stage 1 hypertension. And that's their normal. That's what they're using as normal, which kind of baffles my mind. So to their credit, they said, okay, well, we're going to identify an optimal group. And these numbers started to look a little less associated, but still associated when you looked at the optimal group. The optimal group had a hemoglobin A1C of 5.7, which is still bordering insulin resistance. I mean, if they were measuring insulin levels like Brian was talking about, I'm sure they would still have elevated insulin levels. That is far from optimal. I mean, optimal is a blood pressure of 120/80, a hemoglobin A1C of 5 or less, a fasting blood sugar in the 80s, insulin levels down like 2 or 3 for fasting insulin levels. That was nowhere near what they had defined as optimal. So that's what's wrong with medical data, medical societies. It's not being studied in the right group of people. So LDL is not inherently bad. It has a vital role in our body, and hopefully I can impress that upon you. It transports energy. These lipoproteins that carry LDL transport energy to our bodies. They transport our hormones and our fat-soluble vitamins, and we need them to survive. Cardiovascular disease, multifactorial. Oxidation, inflammation, vascular injury. It's not all about your cholesterol. Metabolic health and inflammation directly impact the importance of your LDL. And those are things that can be controlled with lifestyle. We don't need drugs to control that. In fact, there's a drug that's being developed to reduce inflammation, and it only costs about $70,000 a year right now for people to do it. And it was going around on Twitter, and someone replied, "Gosh, if only there was something less expensive we can do to lower inflammation. What could that be? And it just sums it up so well. So if you're losing weight, decreasing inflammation, reversing your metabolic syndrome, increasing your HDL, decreasing your triglycerides, then LDL is not as dangerous. I think I've hammered that home pretty clearly. And how can you do all that? With a low-carb, high-fat diet, with exercising and moving your body regularly, with getting restorative sleep, with managing your stress, with being part of a strong community, all those things. So if you can do all this and show to your doctor, look, I can do this with lifestyle, there's no way that they should turn you away and say, nope, because your cholesterol is going to go up, you're going to die. It has to be part of the conversation. And that's part of my job, is to try and teach other doctors this, to at least make it part of the conversation. So what does it mean to me? What do fats and lipids mean to me? It depends, and that's what we need to talk about. So I wanted to throw these pictures. This is a coronary calcium score. These are your arteries here. The coronary arteries. This is your left main, the LAD, the circumflex. And they're supposed to be the same color as your tissue here. And this is just chock full of calcium. So a coronary calcium score, if a doctor is worried about your cholesterol, you could get a coronary calcium score. If yours looks like this, okay, cholesterol could be a problem. There are probably 100 other problems if your calcium score is this high, but cholesterol could be a problem. if your calcium score is this, clean as a whistle, you should never be worried about your cholesterol, because if your cholesterol is 300 and you look like this, it's not doing any damage to your arteries. So you can ask for this test. And the purpose of showing you this is I want you to be armed. I want you to be ready if you talk to your doctor, because don't stop with your LDL. Ask your doctor, what about my HDL, my triglycerides, my triglyceride to HDL ratio, my insulin, my hemoglobin A1C, my glucose tolerance, my CRP, my blood pressure, my metabolic health, my calcium score. There's so much more. And a lot of this has to do with how we discuss things with our doctor. Because if you show up and say, oh, no, I know what I'm doing, and you get in sort of an adversarial conflict with your doctor right away, you're going to have a problem. But if you sit down and say, well, listen, doctor, I've done a lot of research in this, and it seems like there are other things that impact it. What do you think about checking a calcium score? What do you think about checking my insulin resistance and checking insulin levels? And all of a sudden, you can be the teachers, because trust me, most doctors out there need you to teach them about this stuff, which seems backwards, but it's true, because we're sort of in our own world and following our guidelines. But you bring this up to them, and you can start to change things for the better, both for yourself and for the next patient who comes along. It's a coronary calcium score. It's a CT scan. Takes about 20 seconds. It's not always covered by insurance, so that's the other problem we're fighting here, but it's only about $100, and it's a pretty low radiation study. You know, the CT scans that you get for a blood clot, is about what we call 5 millisieverts. The coronary calcium score is 1 millisievert, so it's 1/5 the radiation of those in general. So it's something you can definitely ask about. All right, so thank you very much. Hopefully that changed the way you see about cholesterol. Thank you. Did we lose Dr. Lenzkes?
And I know a lot of people,
Okay.
I'm not going to talk anymore. I'm not going to talk anymore, guys. Sorry we kept you a lot. That was my bad. I just want to make those points so we understand it, because it's critical, and we missed it last time. The rest of this talk is not going to be like us two guys talking medicine stuff. The rest is going to be practical stuff. People are going to say, hey, here's what I do. We're going to have 2 nutritionists talk. Jeff Cotterman, who's in the back here, who's outstanding, is going to talk about what he's doing, what kind of experience he's had. And I've seen some of the experience he's had with these bodybuilder guys who are just doing unbelievably well. He's lost 20 pounds. That guy doesn't have 20 pounds to lose on a high-fat diet that I had to beg him to go on, right? So the point is, there's a lot to learn. I hope the big points are the insulin resistance. Don't worry about the fat as much as that you're told. And I think just doing research on your own, learning, don't take our word for it, look into it and understand it, because that's what's important. It's just like anything. You don't have to know how. I just want to flip on the switch and have my light work. So until there's a problem, I really don't need to know anything more than that. But when my light doesn't come on, I have to start looking at other stuff. That's why we went into so much detail on this, so you understand, oh, I don't have to know all this stuff to be on a diet and to do this stuff, but I have to understand the groundwork, and that's what we're trying to lay today. And this is the hardest part, because the rest of it, like Chuck says, is simple. That guy got it, simple. So that's what so next week we're gonna have a nutritionist talk, and then we're gonna have a couple people giving their testimonies of how their life changed. Chuck is one of them. And then on the 5th week is going to be a big week, because we're probably going to be in the main sanctuary by if we didn't scare you all off tonight. We're going to have a question and answer, so you guys can ask all those questions, and we'll be up here on the hot seat explaining it, the nutritionists and us and anyone else who's had experience in this area, because that's powerful. And then the last week we're probably going to either give some testimonies. Some of you are going to talk and tell what your experience was during this time, and then we'll kind of go from there. So we will not go late like we did tonight, and I apologize. That's on me. Sorry, Dr. Scher. I'm going to have to pay him extra. So anyways, thank you all for coming. Greatly appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Sorry.